Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and tabletop role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. This video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild adventure Warriors of Sehanine, designed by Florian Emmerich, JVC Parry, and Ashley Warren for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. Review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping and supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons Andrew, Richard, Joe, Will, Tiny Dancer, Nick, and Rodney, and gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos Dead, Vicente, Gilberto, Sean AK, Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, and Sam. Thank you all very much for your support. There are a lot of dungeons in Dungeons & Dragons. There are not, however, a whole lot of dragons in Dungeons & Dragons. I think characters can go their entire adventuring career without ever having interacted with a dragon, which is terrible. There should be more dragons. And partly that's because dragons are, by their nature, fairly strong, even though there are some weaker stat blocks out there. Warriors of Sehanine, I have no idea if I'm pronouncing that correctly, is a mini adventure designed for adventures between levels 3 and 5, so very firmly tier 1, and it involves a dragon. In fact, a black dragon has attacked a wood elf stronghold. A group of werewolf elves who are not evil. They're kind of like the protectors of the woods. They've got kind of a neat backstory there. But a black dragon has descended upon them and attacked, killed most of them. A few of them were able to flee, and that is our adventure hook for the beginning of this adventure. The players, either in the woods or in a nearby city. It is located in the woods of Sharp Teeth, which is near Baldur's Gate, apparently, in the Forgotten Realms. And the players can find these survivors, and the leader pleads with the characters to go back and rescue her children. And the elves are very, very injured. Like, she's actually missing like an arm. They're all suffering exhaustion. They're in no shape to be able to return, but they are pleading for the characters to go and rescue her two kids, which got left behind during the chaos and the attack, which is an awesome opening hook. I love that. That's really cool. That's a neat backstory with a black dragon, and of course the players don't know that these elves are actually werewolves, which is another interesting twist. I like that a lot. I think that the adventure takes an unfortunate right turn in Chapter 2, where it's a full-on hex crawl, which I think is a vast misstep. And similar to the reason why I didn't like it in Tomb of Annihilation, I like hex crawls. They can be fine, but I think there's ways to do them correctly and very incorrectly. And what I really hate is when you give the players a sense of urgency, like hey, you have to do this thing at this time, and then give them a hex crawl. That sucks. Like, don't put that kind of time strain. If you want to do a hex crawl, make it an open world thing. You want to do an open world adventure, you want to do like a Skyrim or something, that only works if you don't have a actual sense of urgency, or you're playing in video game rules and nothing happens until the players actually like get to the thing, which this one explicitly, that is not the case here. The dragon is injured from the fight, and it will literally heal up the longer the characters take to get there, which is a cool mechanic. But then you throw a hex crawl on top of them where they have to roll survival checks, and they can get lost, and they have these constant random encounters which really slow things down. There are some good scripted encounters in there, but I did not honestly want to see a hex crawl here. That's just a weird place for it when you get such a cool opening hook that's got such a big sense of urgency of like, okay, you got to go rescue it, and this dragon, we've injured it and all this stuff, go. And then now we're going to spend hours having all these random encounters in the woods. That just doesn't sit well with me at all. And I think the final dungeon design is a little disappointing as well. I did really like the art. I mean, this is breathtaking right here. The presentation is fantastic. The organization, the layout, everything, the visual quality is great. The maps are amazing, amazing maps. We get full color, full detailed battle maps of multiple areas. We get player maps, DM maps, gridded and non-gridded versions. Literally, I could not ask for better maps, which is why it's a bummer that the final dungeon just isn't very interesting, which, to be fair, they're liberating this dungeon that was it wasn't a dungeon. It was a home. It was these werewolves, elves home that was attacked. So you're just going in and rescuing the kids and then fighting the dragon. So it's not like there's a bunch of monsters roaming around or anything necessarily. But there are scripted encounters that can make monsters roam around in there, which makes things more interesting. But there's not even like a lot of traps or locked doors or anything like that. It's just kind of an empty area that they can explore and then eventually fight this black dragon in. So that was a very long-winded intro to have. What basically comes down to me having very mixed opinions on this product, because I really like the presentation aspect. Adore the layout, the art, like all of that is just amazing. And it's just a bummer that I was a little disappointed in the way it's structured, especially with the hex crawl. I just don't feel like that was the way to go at all. And I feel like the final dungeon was just not quite as interesting, because again, you set up this black dragon attacking this clan of werewolves. That's such a cool freaking thing to do. And then you don't actually really use the werewolf part of it at all, other than the fact that you can rescue the kids, and then they could, I guess, be your little kid werewolf allies, which is an interesting twist. There is one situation where one of the surviving elves, Fiven, is a chronicler, or kind of like the doctor, and of course he's shady, and he can actually shadow the players or just accompany them, I guess, if the players want to wait for the elves to convalesce a little better. And he secretly was experimenting on the kids' father, who they had recently fought a bunch of orcs, and the dad was slain. And I guess, I don't know if he was slain or just they thought he was killed or what happened, but the Fiven character manages to revive the father and then experiment on him to try and basically not necessarily cure their lycanthropy, but to harness it to where they never have to transform, but they can still keep the strength of it, I guess. But of course, things go wrong, and the dad is like this insane hybrid elf werewolf creature, which is cool. And I like the fact that this character who can accompany the players or shadow them or whatever is trying to keep them away from that. So like the players are trying to go in and rescue the kids and defeat the dragon, but there's like one area they're not supposed to find or get into, and that's what that elf is for. Now they could just miss all of that, which would be a bummer, because I think that's some interesting stuff in there. But that kind of stuff is interesting to me. And plus, the black dragon is also a little disappointing. It's got this neat. Let's see if I can find the picture of it. It's a little further down. Here we go. It's got this neat, like, Willow-Wisp, who is the soul of Valarkin, which is the old leader of Baldur's Gate. So there's a really cool, like, mini backstory there between this Willow-Wisp has been trying to take over these woods and fight back against this werewolf clan, and has corrupted a lot of creatures and done all that. And its latest target is this black dragon called Duskbringer, which is all very interesting and cool, but it's almost doesn't even matter to the player. Like, there's never really a social encounter there or anything of that nature. They can kind of hear occasionally this Willow-Wisp, like, maybe screaming commands to the black dragon. So maybe the idea is they can attack the Willow-Wisp and try to kill it, and that will stun the dragon for at least a round, which is neat. But I wish there was a little bit more where the players could learn about this, or potentially try and use that as like a tool against the dragon or something. I don't know. It was another instance of it being a neat idea that isn't fully executed on to the degree that I wanted to see. Let's go over the so again, chapter 1 is cool with the love that opening, the adventure hook, meeting the elves, which are horribly injured from the dragon attack. That's neat. So chapter 2, Hex Crawl. Look at this. We get a map, a actual hex grid map for our Hex Crawl, which is awesome. An overland map. And this one even goes way above and beyond that, because you get different versions of this map that actually hide the areas on the map. So I think you can always see the keep, but like the ruins of Velar, which is just the kobold lair, and then Marla's Cottage, which is the hag encounter, is hidden on the map, to where you could like overlay, if you're using Roll20 or something, or just give them different, handouts. That's really cool that we get all these different map versions. I have no complaints about that. Nothing but praise for that. I just don't like the actual hex crawl that much. I just don't think it's the right way to do it. I think hex crawls should be used only if you've got an open world adventure where you're really doing a laid back, like, hey, just explore the world. We'll pick up side quests here and there. We'll, whatever's going on. Maybe we've got an overarching main quest we'll get to eventually, but don't give us a exciting incident to start the adventure and have a clear goal and a path, and then put up all these roadblocks in the form of a hex crawl. I really think that's just going to slow things down too much, particularly when more than half of them, first of all, random encounter every day on a D20. Only a 1 to 4 is no encounter, which by my calculation, that is a 80% chance of an encounter. And it's owl bears, it's wolves, it's a dryad, it's giant spiders, it's trolls. It's just a whole bunch of just random fights. Now, I appreciate the fact that there are paragraphs here to describe how these fights work and the tactics involved in all these creatures. That's nice. But I would have, if I'm running this adventure, I am picking out the very few actual meaningful story-based encounters that are here, which is the orcs, which is great. The players can come across a group of orcs that are left over from the attack with the elves, and the orcs are arguing about whether they should join up with the dragon or not. And the players have a chance to basically have a social encounter there, or just fight the orcs here rather than fight them later at the keep, because if they don't do anything, then they will find the orcs later at the keep. And then they will also encounter kobolds who are marching towards the keep to pledge themselves to the Black Dragon. So, of course, they can also interrupt the kobolds there, or maybe follow them into the keep or do something else there. Those are nice little encounters. There's also a neat one with this ghost fox, which is like the fairy fae of this woods, where then go on the ghost fox steals an item from them and runs off, and there's a little chase sequence. So skill checks, basically, which I think is really neat. Those are the encounters I would run. If I'm really feeling like we're not having enough combat, then I will maybe roll 1 or 2 of these random encounters. But it is very, very rare in a D&D adventure when I feel like we're not having enough combat, frankly. So I just don't feel like... and I feel like my party is pretty combat heavy in general, like, compared to a lot of other groups. So I don't know. I don't think the hex crawl was the right call here. I don't like it here. I like that there are good encounters here that I can use, and I like the map that's associated with this, but I would certainly not run this hex crawl as is. And there the 2 other dungeon areas that are given, Marla's cottage. Oops, I'm skipping around too much. And the Ruins of Velar. The Ruins of Velar is just where the kobolds basically come from. There's not really anything to speak of there. It's a one little room thing with some winged kobolds there throwing rocks at people. I would probably just skip it, or maybe put it somewhere where the players might come across it. Maybe, and then they'll see the procession like leaving. That would be probably the more interesting thing to do. Marla's cottage, this is a weird situation because as written in the adventure, it's not terribly interesting. They can come across a green hag, disguised, of course, as a druid, who tells the players, hey, get me a book from the dungeon you're going in, and I'll cast this Death Ward spell on you, which is a nice buff. And then, they already basically got the payment up front. They got the spell cast on them, so I would never return with that book. Screw you, lady. But it gets a lot more interesting in the appendix. There is a section where it expands upon this whole area, and the text does a thing where it just says, hey, this dungeon is modular. You can add your own content in it. Well, duh, first of all. That's kind of what D&D is. But, give me that content. That's why I'm buying this product, is to get that content, to get those ideas, to fill out all of the stuff that I'm trying to run. And in the appendix, it expands upon this section to where there are 3 hags, and they have captured one of the kids. So the 2 kids that you find in the dungeon, it turns out if you use the, whatever you want to call it, the optional appendix section, one of the kids has escaped to try and get help, and he was captured in wolf form by one of the hags. And you can creep up and see the hags arguing about whether they should eat him or try and use him for leverage and all this. And the players have to realize, they might even not realize that, they captured a wolf. What does that matter? Until later when they go to the dungeon, because again, they'll still get the quest, assuming they play it cool. And then they'll learn from the kid, oh yeah, and hopefully it'll come out where they are werewolves, and maybe the players will put 2 and 2 together, and that could lead to an interesting epilogue, after the players deal with the dragon, to go back to the cottage and then have to fight the hags, and realizing that the kid is there. That's exactly how I would play it if I were running things. Tease the fact of the before they go to the dungeon, and then after they realize, oh, we actually know where the other kid is because we heard them talking about a wolf and all that. That would be the best case scenario. But it's just weird. I think that's an interesting, and hags are just fun. Hags are always great in D&D because they automatically give you some really fun social opportunities and encounters, as well as just a built-in, decently powerful combat foe. There's tons of varieties there. There's situations to use them. Everybody likes hags. Come on. So I like to see that encounter. It's just unfortunate that it's relegated to an appendix section, whereas it should have really been part of the main story. And I think it could have been baked in there really effectively, as we see in the appendix. And then the final dungeon, first of all, really cool design, at least from this point of view. But it's a little confusingly laid out, I feel like. As you can see here, and again, these maps are given, the DM version, player version, annotated, non-annotated, gridless, all that stuff, which is great. It really needed like an isometric cutaway, and I hate to say that because we're already given so many great, fantastic maps, but this one really did kind of confuse me with the layout, with the fact that you can climb these stairs, which aren't on this map, and then that leads to this little waterfall, which then has its own secret passage area that the players can find, and then that leads to this room, which is the actual laboratory that I told you about, where that one elf is experimenting on stuff. That leads to this room up here. I hope you can see where our mouse is. So you're supposed to realize all these are connected together. I can't see that on this map at all. And then this dungeon area then connects to the barracks down here, or they go up the stairs. They eventually come across this chapel room, which is where the kids are hiding, which is outside the dungeon. And then they can enter into this dungeon and then eventually go upstairs and fight the dragon. Or the dragon, apparently if it's still convalescing, can be found in this secret grotto. And the stronghold dungeon, which again is neat with the trees on top and all that, because it's part of the woods. I get that. If you took care of the orcs, you convinced them to not pledge themselves to the dragon, or you fought them, whatever. And if you stopped the kobolds, and again, all this is up to the DM, of course, then this dungeon is empty. It is completely empty except for the dragon and that hybrid elf werewolf thing that is kept hidden, which it's weird because we're not entering a monster-filled dungeon by design. I get that, but it just leads to the fact that I would definitely rule that one of those two monster forces, either the orcs or the kobolds, should just be here just to make things more interesting. Like, you've got this awesome battle map we're going to be roaming around in. We got to have some fights in here to make things a little bit more interesting in the middle of all the exploration. And you're not even going room to room trying to find the kids. That's the craziest part. The kids are found literally outside of the dungeon. Like, the first thing that you find is the missing kids. Now, granted, if you mess up your skill check, then they'll run inside and you have to kind of, run after them, I guess, which doesn't seem too hard for hardened adventurers, but you're not even really searching for the kids that much. So I've got mixed feelings about it. Like, I like the fact that we're given this nice full color dungeon. I just feel like there's not enough to actually do in this dungeon once we get there, except for the obvious black dragon fight, which the dragon is given reduced stats. It has its own appendix stat block, which is just a young black dragon that has been significantly reduced. I think it's got like half the breath weapon, the acid breath, and it's got less to hit and all that. It still says CR7, but it looks like it's been significantly reduced. And if the players, if the party makes it there in a decent time, you're supposed to keep track of like how many days, give or take, then they can catch it when it's still resting and still healing up. Versus if you take a long time, for example, you get stuck in that hex crawl, which I wouldn't advise running, then the dragon is going to be at full strength and full hit points. So that could make a big difference on whether the players can actually defeat the damn thing. But technically, their goal is not really to even defeat the dragon. Their goal is to just rescue the kids and get the hell out of there, unless you're really wanting to work for that druid and go inside and get the library. Even then, it doesn't really say the dragon. I mean, there's one encounter you can run, which I would run this one too, where the dragon basically flies by and breathes its acid breath all over the players. I think that's a cool thing to do. Otherwise, it doesn't really patrol its layer very much. Like, it's either healing up in the room or it's just chilling at this pinnacle and not really watching things very well. So there's not even really a big danger there. So it's a cool lead up, but I just feel like it's not this final dungeon. While I love most of the layout, I think a lot of it is kind of confusingly put together unnecessarily so. I just don't like all these floating rooms having to be conjoined via secret entrances and things, and the fact that there's this... It's tricky to do a 3D map in, like, tabletop, top-down construction. Like, I get that, but if that's the case, if you want to make a really cool, 3D design map, then you probably need to give us some kind of like isometric viewpoint or something just to put my fears at ease. But I do love that we get full color detailed battle map here, but there's just not enough going on here unless you put the orcs and the kobolds in here. What I do like is that every single room does mention the fact that if the kobolds are here, or if the orcs are here, or if you've got any. Yes, dear, I'll talk to you in a second. Or if you have any of the elf allies with you, then it's mentioned in the paragraph like how that stuff transpires. So what influence that has, what those characters say, what if there are orcs here, if there are kobolds here, and in what matter. That detail is all here, and it's all done very, very well. So I do like to see that, and that just tells me that one of those groups needs to be here to make things a bit more interesting. Otherwise, you end up with a fairly empty dungeon, which is a little bit disconcerting for sure. You can see this is the actual. Again, this is very odd because it's as an epilogue, as an appendix. This whole thing with the hags is added in with its own battle map, which is cool. There's a shambling mound. There's the hags inside arguing. Like it's got the potential for a really cool story hook. Make that part of the main adventure and not this optional appendix. Like this should absolutely be part of the adventure from the start. All right, let's go over my pros and cons for the Warriors of Sehanine. Pros, excellent artwork, layout, and presentation. No question. The artwork is phenomenal. Everything is put together just beautifully gorgeous. And pro, to go along with that, multiple full-color battle maps with DM and player versions, as well as gridded and non-gridded versions. I basically can't ask for better maps than this. Although I just did earlier, didn't I? Because I wanted a isometric design because of the fact that it's still a little bit confusing with that final dungeon design. And pro, I really did like the Witches 3 appendix section for richly expanding upon the Green Hag Encounter because A, hags are awesome, and B, I think it really did add a lot to the story and made it a lot more interesting, and especially if you can run it before and after the dungeon where the players can realize, oh snap, they've actually got one of the kids there as prisoners, we got to go rescue them. I think that could be a really cool part of the story, in addition to the whole, like, we got to go fight a dragon thing. Cons, pretty much all of Chapter 2 is a mini hex crawl, just filled with random encounters. There are scripted encounters in there that are good, which is what I would do. I would just take those scripted encounters and run those. With the caveat that I think at least one of those groups, either the orcs or the kobolds, you don't want to run because you want them in that final dungeon. You don't want that dungeon to be too empty, which leads to my other con, that the Ravenglade Keep dungeon is a bit empty and parts of it are confusingly laid out. It's just kind of a little bit of a weird design to wrap my head around because it's not floating, but it's attached over this cliff with a waterfall there, and there's stairs, and there's secret entrances and all this stuff. It's a neat idea, but just doesn't quite translate well to a top-down battle map, at least from what I saw. All right, verdict. The dragon hunting werewolf kid rescuing mini adventure starts off promising, but gets bogged down with a hex crawl in the woods. Thank you to everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com/roguewatson, and you can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.